Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Portsmouth School Board meeting for September 13th, 2011. If I could ask the superintendent to please take the roll call.
Ann Mayer?
Here.
Carol Chelman?
Here.
Rebecca Remerson? Kent LePage?
Here.
Dexter Legg? Ian Walker?
Here.
Mitch Shulman?
Here.
Tom Martin?
Here.
Leslie Stevens?
Here.
Clay Haywood?
Here.
Linda Brulette?
Here.
Liz Boynton?
Here.
Thank you. So if I could ask you to join me for a moment of silence, and then we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this past week we lost a member of the community who their family was very involved within the Dondero School District and right through the school district was Mrs. Meats. And Larry Meats actually ran for office a number of times and has always been a concerned parent with the school system. So I'd like that we keep the Meats in our thoughts. Kathy passed away, unfortunately, this past about a week ago.
Okay. Thank you very much. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Motion to accept the minutes from August 16th.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. And then a motion for the minutes of August 23rd.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on those? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Okay. Did anybody sign up for public comment?
I did not.
Nobody did. So nobody signed up for public comment, but if you have an unquenchable thirst to get up and speak at the microphone, just let us know before we move on. Okay. So we'll move on to special presentations. I'll turn it over to the superintendent.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Nancy Moore here, who's our adaptive PE teacher, is here, and I'll welcome her, and she'll explain the program.
Hi, my name is Nancy Moore, and I've worked for the Portsmouth school system for 25 years. I work with children with special needs on their gross motor skills. The reason I'm here tonight is I'm going to be receiving a check from the Knights of Columbus. This is an organization that has been raising money through their Tootsie Roll Fund. Just to give you a little history, about 20 years ago, I contacted different organizations in Portsmouth because there were items we wanted to purchase for my students, and there was just not enough money in the school budget. So the one community organization that responded back to me 20 years ago was the Knights of Columbus, and they have been helping my students ever since. They raise about $3,000 a year. They've been doing this for about 20 years, so you can see that that's a significant amount of money, about $60,000. Some of the items that we've purchased for the kids, we just recently bought a student with special needs a raised desk so that he can actually stand to do his writing assignments. We also were able to purchase a reading program that will help students with autism. And we give a portion of this money every year to the Friends Project, which is they do recreational activities for kids with special needs. And I was just telling the Knights of Columbus that I had a meeting today with our 2 occupational therapists and our physical therapist, and in that meeting they gave me 3 requests for items. They wanted to know if we could use the money from the Tootsie Roll Fund to purchase a special bowl that has a raised lip so that a student can feed himself. They also wanted to know if we could buy a name stamp for a boy who is physically disabled so that he can put his name on his papers. And the last item was from the physical therapist. She wanted to know if we could buy these special pedals to put on a adapted trike for a student that's at the preschool program. The other thing I'd just like to say before turning it over to Bill Ruger, who is the Grand Knight of the Knights of Columbus, who's going to be talking a little bit about that organization. And then he's going to be introducing Mr. Tootsie Roll, Graham Kent, who runs the Tootsie Roll Fund. I'd just like to say that the Knights of Columbus is mostly made up of retired men who have a limited income, and they pay their property taxes, but then they go up and beyond, and every year raise money for my students, and I am just so grateful for that. So I would like to turn it over to Bill.
Again, my name is Bill Ruger, Grand Knight of Council 140 here in Portsmouth. The Knights of Columbus is an international organization made up of Catholic men 18 years or older. The service programs that we're involved in, there's 6 of them, but the one that we're focusing on here this evening is our community and our youth. The Tootsie Roll Drive is held every spring, and you've probably seen the Knights with their yellow aprons on. They say Knights of Columbus, helping special needs in the community. And for a number of years, as Nancy has mentioned, we have been helping her to purchase items that she cannot purchase from her budget. They go above and beyond her budgetary needs. And we're proud to do that. It's one of the areas that we support. We look forward to doing it every year. We meet a lot of nice people as we hand out Tootsie Rolls in exchange for the donations. And like I say, we look forward to it, and we look forward to working with everyone in the community to help Nancy out. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Tootsie Roll, Graham Kent.
Yeah. Yes, I've been chairman a few times of this Tootsie Roll Drive. And the first thing we have to do is get a permit from the city, and for a weekend that we choose if we get our permit early enough. Generally the 3rd weekend in May, that we have 12 businesses that allow us to collect money in front of their business. And we try to fill those for about 11 hours a day for a Friday and a Saturday. And on Sunday, we collect from the Catholic Masses. And with that, this year, we collected $4,100. $4,100. What happens, it goes up to our state council. They take 30% for their contributions to things like the Special Olympics up at UNH that we are the co-host council for most years, and things like that. And we get the check back for 70% of what we collected. And that is what we have available for Nancy Moore. The thing is, we're all getting a little older in the nights, and it's getting a little harder to fill 12 different places for 11 hours a day for 2 days. Well, Nancy Moore brought her whole family down this year, her husband and her children, and helped out. And she has also gotten some of the teachers that work with her, and so she's been a great help to us. It's been great working with Nancy. I get a lot of letters from the teachers that are doing the job for the special needs children. Nancy sends me letters. I got one here I would like to read before this. It's to the Knights of Columbus. Dear sirs, on behalf of the students who participated in the 5-week summer program at Portsmouth High School, July 5th, August 4th, for adolescents with developmental disabilities, I thank you for your generosity. This summer, 5 students learned through a variety of experiences, practiced social skills, and maintained individual skills needed for learning. In addition, students receive physical and special therapies. Your contribution paid for all the groceries and the cooks and the daily snacks, craft materials, and fine motor skills and expressive language. Paperback books were read to the group, listenings, receptive skills. This program is vital for these students to learn and retain skills that will carry them on to the next school year. Materials you provided make the activities possible. And this, he says, feel free to get in touch with me at any time. And that was written by Maxine Feentuck, Program Director, Extended Year Special Education Program. We're very, very happy to help these disabled and special needs kids to try to reach their potential and be mainstream educated children. So with that, I would like to present Nancy Moore, if you would step up here. If I can find this check here. I think there it is. For $2,785.49.
Excellent.
You can use that. People who do such a great job for our school system. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the work you do in the community.
Now, if you will excuse us, we'll let you carry on.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
So we can move on to the next part of the evening's special presentation with an introduction of some new staff members who have come to Portsmouth to teach this year.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, if I could ask new staff to, if you just all come up and line up across the line here, what we're going to do is ask Mr. Zadrovic basically to go through a brief bio of you. So if you get in one line, when your name is called, you could step forward so that the board and folks at home will identify you. You know, we can zero in on you and get a nice headshot for the viewing public as Steve eloquently reads your biography. So welcome. We had a nice reception a little bit earlier. We thank you for coming out. I know it's important. We feel like you're a strong cohort of new teachers here to the district. We welcome you. We wish you a great year. And Steve, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Sure, and the emphasis is on brief. We didn't dig up a whole lot in everybody's past for the biography.
Facebook.
That's right. But as Mr. McDonough said, we're proud to call each and every one of these staff members here a new member to the Portsmouth school community. So I'll just go through and introduce them. We have Deb Rizzo as our new food service director in district. And Deb comes to us with many years' experience, most recently as a dining manager at the Phillips Exeter School. We have Jenna Bulger Judd, is our new first grade teacher at Dondero, comes to us with a master's from the University of Colorado in educational psychology and 5 years of teaching experience. We have Jessica Fagan, our new third grade teacher at Dondero, has a master's from the University of New Hampshire in elementary education and is in her first year, full year teaching. We have Cheryl Harrington, a new fifth grade teacher at Dondero, and Cheryl has a master's in the University of New Hampshire in elementary education with 3 years teaching. We have Heather Perrine, a new third grade teacher at Little Harbor, has her master's degree from Lesley University in curriculum and instruction with 12 years teaching. We have Catherine Fitzpatrick, English teacher at the high school with a master's from Tufts University in English and 11 years teaching. We have Rachel Fritchie, new science teacher at the high school with a bachelor's from the University of Maine at Farmington in earth science secondary education and is in her first year teaching. We have Laura LaValle, English teacher at the high school, a master's from the University of New Hampshire in English, teaching 8 years. We have David Lilly at the high school in the automotive position with 10 years experience in the automotive industry and in his first year teaching. We have Olin Johansson, choral director, master's from the University of Massachusetts in music and composition in his first year teaching. We have Caitlin Kern in the music position at the middle school with a bachelor's from the University of New Hampshire in music education and 2 years teaching. And we have Chris Rose, middle school science teacher with a bachelor's from the University of Vermont in business administration, in his first year teaching. And not here with us this evening, but also a new teacher is Rebecca Rader, a new nurse at the high school with a bachelor's from Moravian College in 2 years. So those are our new folks with us tonight.
Great, well, welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard. So the most unpleasant part is we'd like to actually have you walk around and meet and greet us and shake all of our hands.
Starting with you. Starting with you. Did we get the pro?
You gotta go.
Nice to meet you.
I will. I already have. Welcome. Yes. I already have. Coming out, Rachel.
Great. Congratulations. I hope it's not great for you. All right, take care. Hi, I'm Carol. Congratulations, Chris. Hi, Chris. Nice to meet you. My stepson went to UVM. Yeah, he majored in wildlife biology. I know.
Hello again.
Right. Now, you have a business background, but you're teaching science, right? Cool. Well, business and science. Yeah, absolutely. I think so. It's great. Hi, you're an English teacher, right? Great. I love English teachers. Nice to meet you again. Thank you so much. Hello again. Would she mind having her? My son across my desk. Hello. Thank you. You're doing a great service to society. No, it is. Hi again. Hi. What are you doing?
You're coming from Vermont?
Excuse me? No, this is actually my room. Program. Yeah, I'm sure you do a great job.
It was cold. We were talking about.
Welcome. Oh, good. That's great. Enjoy it. They're great. Nice to meet you. You're at Dondero? Oh, really? That's right.
He said at the end,
I'll have to look at your schedule. What's that?
he was a virtual.
Once again, nice to see you.
Partied a lot at UVM.
Great. That's what you're going to was the charm. And it's not the bread complex, it's not the pizza, it's not the dumpling.
Coming out, Heather. Nice to see you.
Yeah, he was a staff.
Oh, thank you.
I'm nervous.
Hi, Tom Martin. Hi, Heather. Nice to meet you.
Oh my God, baby to middle school, where you are, right? You're in the middle school. I'm like,
Fourth and second. You're fifth. No, third. So you're. Got it.
The first day.
I remember my daughter really excited about it. Yes. I bought him a guitar a bunch of years ago.
Oh, yeah.
I was like,
Hi again.
I should have been in all the cafeterias.
I'll probably have her down the road.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'll see you on the road.
I don't blame you.
I hear it. I'll see you in the hallway. Okay, all right.
Nice to meet you. Thanks.
Nice to meet you. Hi, I'm Liz. Nice to meet you.
You're all dismissed. Thanks for coming.
Come home.
Okay.
You'll need the
Do
rest.
you want to say something to them? They're already leaving.
I have something to make.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I can't.
You want him?
No, let him go, but I want to make a comment.
You want to make? Oh, okay. Have a good night. We'll talk about you while you're gone. Okay. Yes.
I just want a clarification. Out of that group, we had 3 new teachers going to Dondero. Is that correct? I want to just make sure that these are 3 new talents that we're putting in at Dondero.
Yes.
And so, things are always on a change here. We're in a public school system, and good luck to them. And I think along with the seasoned staff there, we can see good things coming. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Can I amend that? And 2 Portsmouth High graduates. right?
Yes.
Yes.
There's nothing better, is there?
There's nothing better.
Both music.
Yes.
Olin
and who else?
Caitlin Kern. Her mom and dad are both Portsmouth High graduates. Not that I know that for a fact, but they
Yes.
Yeah, they are.
are. Yeah.
Well, I guess we won't hold that against them.
We certainly won't.
They're still young enough.
Okay, thank you for that, Ken. So we'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In your materials, you have the most recent board and administrator, as well as my superintendent's update for the month of September. Basically, I shared with you and others, kind of repeated in some sense, some of my opening remarks to staff, share with you some of the upcoming events here in September, as well as highlighted the new teachers that we saw here this evening. I have shared with folks a draft of our annual progress report. That's essentially looking at the NCLB data and a lot of metrics about the data, the performance of the district. We're hopeful to publish that and share that with a larger community by the end of September. And so I would welcome any board feedback, not here this evening necessarily, but you could certainly, send me an email or give me a call about suggestions to perhaps make that a stronger document. I also have provided, as requested at the last meeting, some information about safe routes to schools. Basically, I was asked to find out what the current status of the grant funds happen to be, find out whether or not monies approved under the grant could be used for another purpose, and I have been told they cannot be, as well as an explanation of why the process over the last few years has been quite cumbersome. I did speak with the chair in preparation of this agenda, and he's indicated that we'll discuss this at a future workshop meeting as to whether or not how you want to proceed with safe routes to schools. I also shared with you an article that's in a Stanford review entitled "The Missing Link in School Reform." And I do so because I think it serves as a ringing endorsement about our professional learning community's work. There's much in school reform about teacher quality, and while a teacher's cumulative abilities, knowledge, and skills are critical, it also speaks to the importance of those highly qualified teachers working collaboratively. In the schools that are characterized by frequent interaction, high trust, and sharing are typically those schools that recognize have the highest student achievement. I'll have Steve update you on Nichinon in a moment, but you also have 3 pieces of correspondence. One is a thank you note I wrote on behalf of the school district, thanking Mr. Parkinson and all the members of the DPW staff for kind of quickly getting on the bike and pedestrian walkway into Cloud Drive at Little Harbor. You have a memo from Attorney Dwyer where she's explaining her work over the last few years in resolving residency issues, and also a letter that, as you may recall, the council had requested an update insofar as what the board was opting to do with school choice. So I shared the chairman's letter with you, his response back to the city council. And Steve, if you might quickly update the board on what's happening with the visit.
Sure. Just to make you aware, this October we will again have a visit from a group of Japanese students that will be joining us October 4th through October 8th. We have 17 wonderful families here in Portsmouth that have offered to take in a host student for that time. And there's one particular event on that during that time that I'd like to make you aware of and certainly extend an invitation for you. At 10 o'clock on October 5th, 10 a.m. in the morning, there'll be a ceremony here at City Hall that will honor the delegation from Japan visiting. There's a group also from the city of Nichinon joining the students, and this will be a welcome ceremony for them. All school board members are certainly invited to that. So again, look forward to a great exchange for both our middle and high schoolers. We have a mix this year, and just a lot of opportunity to build some cultural exchange and relationships.
Great. So yes, comments about the report.
Yeah, the only thing I want to go back on is I do want to get further in depth in the very near future in regards to residents and residents disputes. I think it's something between now and budget season we really need to take seriously. I don't question the numbers that Kathleen has reported here. It's the numbers that I have here that I know that were looked at. It's the number of those that have slipped between the wires here, and we do have that. I mean, if we're not going to face it, then we've really got to pull our heads out of the sand. This is when students are coming from other outside districts into the school system. There's almost sometimes a protective covenant on some of this, and we've got to stop it at the expense of the school district. When you look at it, last year you had about 9. That's almost half a classroom. Okay, so in each one of these, if you add up, it's 9 times. Let's just call it $14,000. So you're talking better than 2 teachers worth of income when you start to look at this. So there's a lot more than just putting what Kathleen has done here. I think we need to have Kathleen. I think we have to have a serious discussion with the principals and so forth, because I don't think we take it as serious as we should, this impact for every student that slips in on this. And we have students that do pay outside tuition because they wish to come to the school system. We have a number of them at the high school. Not a large number, but they're doing it the honest way. And when people do abuse the system, it really bothers me because, again, I'm not disputing the numbers of what she worked on. It's the numbers that we don't have that are questioned out there. So in the near future, I would like us to have not just a memorandum, but a full discussion, along with Kathleen, and maybe it's all 5 principals. Thank you.
Anyone else on any of the
just the progress report? That's the target is to have it completed by the end of September.
Yeah.
I know there's a lot of ideas going in around this type of what we want to present. I just wanted to make sure I had enough time.
Typically schools are you're required to post your progress annually against adequate yearly progress. And so there is, if you go to the New Hampshire DOE website, you can log on and see all the details and all the data for each of the school districts and schools. This is a way to kind of take some of that information and make it a little more palatable, more friendly, as it were, some key statistics right out of the gate, kind of proficiency levels district-wide, and provide some text to support that. We're also trying to talk a little bit beyond what a report card would be as required under the federal government about what our mission and vision is here in the district. And so pages 2 and 3 are talking a lot about that as opposed to hard data.
Right.
So that's the input I'm looking for. I'm trying to really make it crystal clear to folks what our mission is here in the district and what teachers and staff are working on every day on behalf of children.
Okay.
So I'd appreciate any feedback folks have on that.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, Leslie.
I wanted to ask about the students from Nichinon. Is there an opportunity at the high school for, do they go to school and spend the day there? Is it all day, every day, or is it just once or twice? Or
Yeah, last year they shadowed their host student for a considerable amount of the time, and what we've heard in feedback was that they'd like to do things. We also did things quickly last year, like a tour of the middle school, and we brought them to the elementary schools in small groups of Japanese students, worked with elementary students making origami, things like that. They thought those were very valuable activities. So what we'd hope to do is structure some time just shadowing at the high school, but then also a good deal of time engaging in all the schools.
will there be an opportunity at the high school for other students to meet them and mingle with them?
Yeah,
or?
and so what we'd like to do at the high school, similar to what we did at the elementary, is maybe have small groups of Japanese students sit in with classes in an exchange, a question and answer and feedback. In fact, one of our new teachers comes to us fresh from teaching in Japan and talking to Laura LaValle. She would love to have them in her class.
That would be great.
Yeah,
Yep.
so.
That would be great. And is there a plan for us to go there again?
We haven't made any details in stone yet, but they are very eager, as are we, to keep this relationship going.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Seeing nothing else?
No, I know the only other item was to have this, the financial report, but for a whole host of reasons, it's been difficult in getting that prepared. I'll let Steve talk about that just briefly.
Okay.
Board members were very kind tonight to sign the year-end reports that I prepare for the state, which is a pretty time-consuming, extensive process. We have 5 reports that we prepared. 2 of them are different versions of our 2011 results, and 2 of them are different versions of our 2012 appropriations. But I would like to report that on the 6th of September, the City Council voted to transfer from a fund that they had $302,584 to the school department appropriation to help defer and hopefully cover the additional retirement costs as a result of the change in rates that occurred after our budget had already been set. As a result, our general fund budget now is where it was $36,904,000, is now $37,206,584. So we will be updating the monthly reports to reflect that change, and the reports that you signed tonight also have also reflect that change for the state, as these documents are used for the tax rate setting.
Yes, Ann.
I wondered in regard to that $300,000 that was put in, does that mean that we will need to do that next year? In our next budget?
We will need to cover the increased rate cost in next year's budget.
So it's not necessarily the same amount?
No, because it's a percentage of salary earned, and based on contract, there will be a COLA adjustment. So it will be a different rate, yes. And the rates of the published rates that the New Hampshire retirement system set by the legislature that we are required to make the contributions on remain the same, but the amount that it's figured on, i.e. the total salaries for the district for those eligible for retirement system, will in fact change. And
so
to my knowledge, it will be higher than that. And I don't believe they have any money set aside on the city side to help us out next year.
I think you're right.
So it could be a big number. Yes, Kent.
And just to follow up on that, what was the number that you said that increase was, Steve?
$302,584.
So approximately, just slightly less than 1% of the current budget?
Correct.
About 0.9 something percent of the budget. So, and again, we're going into an election cycle where we're not far away from budget and so forth, just so people are well aware. That would mean without having any reductions, the budget has to minimally go up at least 1% to make that coverage. Is that a fairly correct statement?
I would say that's a reasonable statement at this
point. If we can't go up 1% just to stay as is with nothing else in it, including raises and all that other good stuff, we're looking at probably to do something at the 3% mark at this point, just to stay zero. Zero
to
program.
Stay levels, yeah, exactly.
Zero program.
Services, right, exactly. Which would be the third year in a row we've had this conversation.
I think longer than, I think we've been negative. I mean,
Right.
zero or less.
Right.
Money-wise. Thank you very much.
Yes. Anyone else? Okay, thanks. Okay, so moving on. So what I'd like to do tonight is to open up this conversation on the impact of school choice. So I want to first begin by apologizing to the board. I did say at the last board meeting that I would send an email asking anyone who is interested in serving on a committee looking into the issue of school choice and its fallout. I would also add that the superintendent did, in fact, remind me. But in my own defense, I just want to say it was the beginning of school at the university, and to be honest, everything went in one ear and out the other. So I apologize for not following through on that, but that's not to say that I haven't been thinking about this issue. In fact, I have been thinking about it quite a bit. And the more I thought about it, the more questions I had about what it is we actually need to tackle. So what's the problem we're trying to address? So I'd like to lay out a little bit of my thinking for the board as a way to begin the conversation, and then open it up for more discussion and see what the sentiment of the board is and how people would like to proceed. My biggest concern is that that we not jump and spend millions of dollars on a false perception and fixing a problem that doesn't exist. I do want to be clear, I don't want to cause a big educational distraction from the instructional path that I think we're on, the positive path that we're on, which isn't to say that we should do nothing, but whatever we do, what I mean to say is that we need to do it with our eyes open, and we need to do it with our, and to refer back to an old kindergarten term, with our thinking caps on as we approach this problem. So I began this year on the first day of school at the high school telling the Portsmouth teachers not to believe everything that they read in the paper. In spite of what a handful of families might lead you to believe, I told them, I do not believe that Portsmouth schools are failing. I do not believe our teachers are failing, and I certainly don't believe our students aren't learning. And I wanted them to know that we appreciate what they do and that we're on their side. I would remind everyone that we as a board have agreed with the district's educational strategy to ensure that our students learn and graduate ready to be successful in the world. And that strategy is to have teachers work together to improve their collective instructional practices through a variety of means, including professional development opportunities, instructional goal setting and assessing those goals, and the implementation of professional learning communities. In short, I think we're trying to create an environment in the district where teachers share their best ideas and practices with their colleagues in the name of teaching and learning. So when you improve the quality of teaching, you improve the quality of student learning, and I think that's what we're trying to do. One of the best things that this board has done in the past few years, I think, has been to ask the administration to develop comparative metrics so we can better assess where we stand and how we're doing. And as we look at those metrics, some of which the superintendent shared with us in draft form tonight, we can see a focus and a movement on a continuum of improvement and progress. And if we look at the end result of our K through 12 educational system here in Portsmouth, we see that 90% of our students graduate from high school and 85% of those who graduate go on to some post-secondary education. So I would like to sort of reassure citizens of Portsmouth that in spite of what a handful of families might lead you to conclude, we don't have an educational crisis in our elementary schools. The educators of Portsmouth know exactly who the students are that fall outside of the proficiency categories. They know exactly who the students are who are struggling. And the teachers, along with appropriate academic support services, are doing their best to help these students and bring them back up to level. We have dedicated professionals in our schools who love teaching, and they continue to show us their best face and dedication. This is not to say that we're perfect. As a community, we actually may be struggling on how to afford the excellence that so many cry out for, but we are moving forward with gains in student learning and achievement across all grade levels. So as everyone knows, the school board learned just prior to the opening of this year that 36 students and their families had requested to transfer from Dondero to Little Harbor as allowed by No Child Left Behind. This caused a spike in the Little Harbor student population. However, even without the 36 students, we knew that the Little Harbor population was growing. And on top of that, I think we had an additional 20 unanticipated students show up at the beginning of this year as well. So we knew last year that there was an issue with space and the growing size of the Little Harbor population when we discussed the question of redistricting. And given the demographic projections we received from NESDAG at that time, which I would remind everyone was only 10 months ago, it was clear that the projected elementary student population was heading into a decline. And the administration at the time told us that they were confident that they would be able to manage this bubble of students. And we agreed we could live with a few larger classes in anticipation of declining enrollments as opposed to redistricting a few families. That seemed to be the best choice with the least impact. At the same time, the school board created an elementary school facilities assessment committee because we knew that each of the three buildings needed upcoming attention in one way or another. So I would ask us to continue moving forward on the track we're on, addressing our initial concerns about the facilities. We need a more comprehensive understanding of the assessment report, especially costs involved, and then begin to make decisions moving forward. So we had talked about creating a new committee. What I would like to do is suggest that we reconstitute the already existing elementary facilities committee with new members and a new charge perhaps, and then we ask this group of board members initially, and we task them with ingesting the educational facilities assessment study, come back to the board with options and recommendations on how to best move forward addressing the conditions of the elementary school facilities. So let me say also that I realize that this process would take us into conversations about grade level configurations. In fact, some people are already talking about it. Some suggest 3 schools with K1, 2, 3, and 4, 5 as an option. Others have suggested 2 schools with K through 2 and 3 through 5. Our question is, do we believe there's a problem with the K-5 configuration we have in Portsmouth, or do we as a board believe that the current educational model we have of 3 K-5 schools in, I guess what you might call a modified neighborhood concept is right for this community? Some have suggested we consider consolidating to 2 K-5 elementary school buildings. I have even heard it suggested that we build 2 new separate elementary schools next to each other in a campus-like setting to take advantage of shared efficiencies and sell off the other buildings. So this committee will have to look at cost comparisons. How would the cost of upgrading the current 3 facilities over time compare with building new? Or does it make sense to stay where we are and go with modest upgrades to the current facilities? These are some of the questions we need to consider. These are the questions that only the school board can answer. And the answers to these basic questions, I think, will impact everything we do relative to the elementary facilities issues moving forward. So I think I'd like to put on the table a discussion about forming a new committee that would begin to look at what options stand before us and advise us as a board how we might move forward, maybe even outlining a bit of what the process might be, and maybe even deciding does it remain a school board committee, or do we want to broaden it and invite members of the public and hold public hearings? And so I think that could be part of the charge of a committee to initially to come back and advise us on a process that makes sense. And then there is a lot of information online about a full variety of schools and school districts that have looked at this over the last few years. I found a great one in Hopkinton, Mass., where 10 years ago they did a very actually thorough self-study. So the superintendent in that district asked the principals and teachers and educators to get together and look at the issue of grade configurations, positive, negative, impact on transportation, take a look at what other outlying and nearby communities are doing throughout the state. In Massachusetts, what does some of the grade configurations look like? We could go through that. I also, personally, I think you could actually just put Portsmouth in name where Hopkinton appears, because some of the recommendations, positive, negative suggestions, they're going to be the same. I mean, it's really a question of values and what districts and what communities want to do. So with that, I'll just sort of open it up, throw it out, and see where people want to move forward on this. Yes, Kent.
I'll just begin on discussion. A couple things. One is I do think there are 3 areas of outlook that the committee needs to do. One is cost, one is educational outcome, and one is community. And I think you may have even touched upon that, and I know we all touch upon that, because those are what the board really has a large control. They may not have as much on community atmosphere, but the other 2 they definitely do. I also think the committee should be a limited number of people, just because you get too large. And then I absolutely do think you need to have public input at all 3 elementary schools, but I would highly suggest that all 3 principals are members of the committee, probably 3 members from the school board, either Steve or Ed sitting in ex officio, and then I'm open to, and I have mixed feelings whether you have 1 parent representation from each one, because then the reason I don't have a hesitation to have somebody on, but somebody feels jolted on that. So I think it may not be parent specific, but I think there should be a parent representation there, and it doesn't have to be the same person all the time. The schools can decide how they want that, because again, we're not trying to eliminate anybody, because you're going to have I would hope we would have the larger discussions at all 3 schools, which we did during that last big major redistricting. Is everybody went to the other schools. I mean, they were assigned to go to all the schools and have a great discussion. Other than that, I think the topics of discussion should be decided for those 3 silos that are out there that I mentioned, are up to that committee. And I do think you kind of, I'm always a deadline type person. It's not something you want to have drag out. I think you want to make sure that you're falling in compliance with certain things. Maybe budget may be portion of this, but definitely I feel that it should be going no later than April 1st, and then the board gets an update and then a presentation to the public from the findings at all sometime no later than the last meeting in April. I truly believe it can be done. It kind of gives you the buffer of the month of May, but I'd rather not see that. And that's kind of what I had, thought would work well community-wise. I know that on the facility committee, with new jobs and so forth that I've taken on and work, morning meetings just don't work for me anymore. I've got to go, and I would like to be a member of that committee, however it forms. And I have to go to the, never thought I'd say it, I have to go to the evening side.
Thank you. Tom?
A lot of the details, I think, can be worked out once a committee is established. But I think Kent brought up a long list. I think, for me, the glaring piece is really looking at the instructional trend that we're trying to drive here in the community and the money that we're putting towards it. And part of it is to say, can we get a better value for the buck that we're spending? And ultimately, you look at the budget that we've got, and if you look at the amount of money that is being spent towards supporting 3 schools, or if it's 2 schools, I think the ultimate reality comes down to can we spend money wiser and generate a better educational outcome. So the programs that we've got in place, whether it's the PLCs, whether it's this other program that we might put in place, but the work that is undergoing today, can we accelerate it? Can we support it better? And can we look at how we're spending money differently? And so not knowing exactly what this committee will come up with, I think the focus is really trying to accelerate educational outcomes, spending money wiser, and are there things that we can do that are completely out of the box that this opportunity might afford? We have 3 schools, and I don't necessarily think we're talking about whether we go to 2 or 3, or maybe we configure something differently, or we try to take a look at different teaching models versus just maintaining the status quo and trying to do some things differently. So I know I'm running across the spectrum, but I think I support getting a committee started and having them outline what are some of the really key pieces of community involvement, teacher involvement, but I think the committee would be served well by keeping it small, by looking out to other communities that have done similar work, because I think we can R&D this pretty quickly and come up with some very similar conclusions. But I think the outreach piece to really connect with the community, connect with the people that are going to be here in the schools, to understand what they are thinking, what they want, what are some of the needs, is going to best serve us for our own community. So,
Carol?
I think the first thing I would like to hear from Steve and Ed as to what you think about this topic and this idea of a committee and going forth in this direction. That would be my first question, would be to hear from you guys and see what you think. The second comment that I have to make is that I think that this is a gigantic task. I think it is absolutely gigantic. It could completely change the way we deliver education at the elementary level. It could radically improve education, or it could damage education, and it's gigantic. And I think from the people who've come and talked to me about the possibility of having 2 schools or these other configurations, I think you're going to find that there's incredible strong emotions and passions around the idea of neighborhood schools versus this other idea. And I'm not saying which idea I agree with or which one I think is the way we should go. I have certain opinions, but I'm going to keep an open mind. But I think you're going to find unbelievable passion on this topic. So I think it's going to be tremendously controversial. I think it would be smart to look back at the middle school process and figure out where we went wrong and where we went right and how we handled the middle school. When I moved to Portsmouth, it was in the middle of what had been going on for years. And I know there was a committee that had been formed with city council members and various other people, and they essentially came up with a decision that was a non-decision, a non-recommendation. I think we should think about that. This is, I think, far more controversial and more significant than the middle school issue. And that split the city, and there was so much going on, and we ended up with study circles, whether some people think that was the right way or the wrong way. We ended up with study circles. It took years. I think that this is, I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with jumping into quickly putting a committee together and just starting to dig into these gigantic issues in the form of a committee. I don't know that I have the exact answer as to how we proceed, but I'm not comfortable with this. And I think people in the community, if they hear about this, are going to be very concerned about, oh my God, what's happening? Are they going to just put a committee together and decide that we're going to have 2 schools instead of 3 elementary schools? And so I think that we need to proceed in an absolutely professional, transparent, thorough manner. And I just think jumping into a committee this quickly on something this big, I think is going to be a mistake. And I think it's going to sort of go a little bit like the way that committee did with the middle school. And I think we're going to be just doing in our own juices, trying to figure this thing out. And then we're going to end up maybe having to do something like study circles or some other method of getting community involvement. I mean, there's no doubt there has to be community involvement. I mean, public hearings, absolutely, but maybe more than that. You know, so I guess what the bottom line is caution. I would advise caution on how we go forward. And I'm not comfortable tonight saying, okay, I agree to a committee like this. I need to know more.
Okay. Just one clarification on the issue of the middle school. One thing that's different, you know, and we could do the same as a board here. We committed to the middle school concept as a board. So whatever decisions flowed from that, you know, we were, as a board, we're not willing to consider going back to the junior high school model, for example.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the board has every right to say, if it wants to, that we're committed to the K-5, and that's what we want to stay with in terms of the education we deliver. I mean, so, you know, that's on the table. You don't have to change. We can stay with where we are.
Right, that's a little more focused.
Yeah.
Than the way, and I would feel more comfortable about something more focused like that.
Well, the board has the ability to do that if it wishes. And I have Leslie and then Ann. Sorry.
I'm going to disagree with Carol a little bit because I think the discussion has to happen, and it already has started because we've had the facilities evaluation, and we kind of are starting this process already. And we have to start somewhere. You know, all change starts somewhere. So if we have some really clear ideas about what we need to discuss, at least, then we need to move that discussion forward. And I agree with you, Mitch, that if we can have the right task and come back with, in a small group, with some ideas about what we need to look at and whether those are values that we have, like the middle school concept versus, you know, if we want to say as a school board, we are committed to K through 5 or whatever it is, you know, start there, and then from those smaller decisions, other decisions will be made. So I think we actually are already discussing this and we're already in this process. So I think it's the first step. I think we're in the first step.
Okay. Ann.
I would agree a little bit with each of you and with Kent as well. I think we're already in the discussion. I think it is our job. I think it should be a school board committee. I think as time goes on, other people could be included because we would like input from other people. But just as we did with the middle school concept, that was easier for us because we really looked at it the same way, and we did not have difficulty coming to consensus about the fact that we believed in that middle school concept. And I personally believe in the K to 5 myself. I know other people have other ideas, and I'm certainly open to listen. I know we don't have neighborhood schools anymore, but they're quasi neighborhood schools, and to have just 2 schools, they would be too big. So I think personally, at this stage of the game, 3 would be my preference. But I think looking into it slowly, I wouldn't say we're going to quite rush to be dealing with April, but there's a lot to digest. I mean, looking at that report that we got on the facilities, I gave it a quick overview, and then I put it aside and rested my brain, and it's not the kind of thing that I look at the way I look at curriculum. That's kind of my thing. So I think it will take time to sift through and decide what we should do and how we should do it. But I think we need to start.
Okay, Kent, Leslie?
I want to go back just a little bit on the middle school because it does actually connect to the elementary schools. I've got to give you a quick history. My daughter, who is now in Indiana as a research scientist, and I can't even think of the year now, it was so many years ago, but she's 31, so go figure it out. She was the first group to go to a middle school. If you can imagine that, and believe me, you talk about passion, and I don't think, except maybe Ann and Linda to a degree, when we went from 7th and 8th grade at the high school and we put the 6th grade up there, you would have thought a nuclear bomb had gone off downtown Portsmouth. There were board members and everybody who had concerns. And can you imagine today if that board, and I wasn't part of that board, it was long before I was on the board, because my daughter, again, was 5th grade going into 6th grade. She was the first 6th grade to go at that middle school. Can you imagine what the elementary schools would be like today if we had the 6th grades still there? Can you imagine? That board was chastised by the local papers, plural. There was a lot of controversy of this was horrible that you were putting 6th graders in with 7th and 8th graders, It was as controversial as you could get. They took a bold move, that board, and they took a lot of criticism from it. But they did it because they knew the elementary schools needed the space at that time. So again, there is a connection here, when you look at. So we went to that middle school concept. The board reaffirmed that middle school concept. And the only thing, and believe me, being the person that was in the limelight a heck of a lot of the time didn't want to be, the only thing about the middle school that was controversial was location. Nothing was ever hidden. People may have thought it was location. The board stood that it wanted a middle school concept. And we stand still, as far as I know, wanting a middle, because we could decide today, put the 6th grade back in and utilize the buildings differently. But we didn't, and that's a decision that we made. So again, they are connected. It's a long history there, but can you imagine what the elementary schools would look like today if that board hadn't taken that bold move to make it a middle school? And again, I can't do the math. It was a long time ago.
Bursting at the seams.
Be over 600 kids in Little Harbor.
Yeah.
Listen.
Maybe one of the first things that this committee can do is to bring back research and information about the different configurations for elementary school, because we don't need to recreate the wheel. It sounds like from what Mitch is saying, there's lots of information about all of that. So maybe we could do a small retreat, like how we've done like the 5 to 9 kind of thing, and focus on information once that committee collects it and brings it back, and then we can have a discussion more informed about what we think and what we as a group feel about that.
Right. Okay, so I see we could meet easily, I think, Kent's deadline, if we were to look at it as April. But I'm also hearing the board suggest that, from Carol's point of view, that we're not jumping in and asking this committee initially to come back with a recommendation to change the configuration. We're asking maybe a couple of tiered steps that this committee would do. And the first would be, information gathering, looking at what do other schools in New Hampshire have. I will gladly share with everybody, or go online yourself, this executive report from Hopkinton, Massachusetts. It's fascinating. And they developed it by different subcommittees on different topics. That's a lot of work. I don't think we need to do that amount of work. I think, a group of people on this committee could go out, gather information, and look at the pros and cons of all kinds of things, and then come back and then lay out for us, A, how do we want to proceed in terms of even committee makeup then? When do we bring the community in? And B, maybe they recommend, look, we want to deal with the facilities of the building. We like K-5. It'll cost, I don't know, $40 million over the next X amount of time to renovate and retrofit our existing buildings. It'll cost $40 million over time to build new. So, I think Kent's right. We really need to look at comparative costs. And Tom's right. We need to figure out, what's the best we can get for the amount of money we spend. And if it's keeping the buildings we have and staying with this and making it work, that's the recommendation.
Mitch, only one other further recommendation on this. As this committee meets and whether the membership of the committee, I want to make sure that we post it so that anybody in the community can attend, but making sure that those elementary parents, if they wish to attend, to listen to this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that, there may be individuals out there that think there's all these secret meetings,
Transparent
but
as
I
possible.
have yet to see them in 18 years.
I know.
Someday somebody will give me that special key.
Carol.
Hi. I'm just trying to organize this in my brain. I like the tiered step approach. Isn't the first question, what do we need to do to the existing schools? And how much will that cost? Isn't that the first question? Because I'm just afraid of this jumping to the question of, do we change our system? And will that be cheaper? And reading studies
Right.
from other places, it may sound appealing in
think we
different
need to
ways
do
before
things in
we've even
parallel.
figured out. Right. So the first
I
step,
hear
though,
you.
is about the current buildings we have, what we need to do to those, and
Which is-
how much that will cost.
Right,
Which
and
is
that's
done.
We've got it.
We've got the exact
done.
numbers?
Yeah. The-
And exactly what it will cost? Because there were a lot of
different.
options of what
There
we
are
could
different
do.
options.
It's all there.
I think.
It's all
Right,
there.
okay.
But
So we've got
that's
that,
right.
okay.
in the
So
report.
then the next step, since we have that, is we can look into changing the grade configuration, how much
Or
that
not.
would cost.
Or not.
Or not. I mean, it's a question is, partly the question is, if you don't want to go down that road, how far down that road you want to go to before you say, wait a minute, I like this
Exactly.
road?
And also, the other concern I have while we're talking about this is, how do we conduct these meetings and make our findings in terms of, do we want to change the grade configuration because it saves money versus, or if it saves money at all, whether it does or doesn't, I don't know.
Right.
But, the guiding principle and goal should be maintaining or improving the quality of education.
Absolutely.
And that's number one,
Yes.
and saving money is important. But if we get totally pigeonholed into that issue, it may look very appealing to go down this other route. But we haven't asked ourselves the questions of what will be the impact on the quality of education.
Right.
And that, to me, seems to be the first question.
I agree.
Because I know myself, I'm not going to vote for something that's going to, bring down the quality of education in the city. So.
No one
Well,
is.
that was my point, saying, I really don't want to cause a big distraction from the path we're already on. I think we're doing all the right things, we're moving in the right direction, we're seeing rise in student achievement across the grades. So absolutely, I agree with Carol.
Yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying. I mean, there's two sides of it. If the end goal is to take what we're delivering and improve it, we can do it by radically changing it, but there's a cost to the radical change versus saying, are there things that we can do incrementally? So the plan as it starts to come through might come to a head where it says, there's one aspect that we need to radically change. But these other pieces, we would do more harm by disturbing it versus slowly improving it. And we're on a good path. So I think that's part of what the committee can flesh out, is to identify what are things that are working and need to be protected versus other things that, we need to do something radical here and we're going to pull this thing out and put something new in. But I think the piece here from an educational standpoint is, we have something that's working. We have a strategy. We're on a mission. We are seeing improvement. But now it's saying, the functional foundation of what we're delivering with equipment, facilities, how we do things might need to be supported differently for us to achieve the mission that we're on. So I think that's the flushing out that committee can do, is identify some of those key areas, present them back, and then as a committee, the board can identify and say, prioritizing, these are the things that we need to do. Put this as first. So the committee then has guidance back from the board to go back and further develop the mission of what the end results and recommendations are back to the board based on, that factual finding and identifying what are some of the key issues, the board responding and prioritizing what those issues are, and then that committee can go forth and present its findings. I mean.
Okay. So I guess what I'd like to do then is to, let me just say that I think when I talked to Ed and Steve about our retreat that's coming up, one of the things that I asked is, because there's going to be a facilitator involved, is that maybe there be some activities at the retreat that sort of help us, move a conversation like this forward. not to talk about it, but some activities, like Steve used to do the visioning with the board, and so at least we can have some small group discussions and get some juices flowing about this. So I guess what I'd like to do is, hear from people. I will this time, I promise, send around an email. Please get back to me to let me know. Kent, I know you've already said you'd like to be, so I hear that. So get back to me. We'll form a committee. I will write up a draft of a tiered charge, or at least the first step, without going too far, and bring it back to the next meeting so everybody can see it, and then we can decide that that's what we want to do. Does that sound okay?
Sounds good to me.
Yes. And so, great. Thank you very much. Good conversation. Second reading.
Yeah, so in your, you saw these policies at our last meeting. This is second reading, so you'll be approving these policies. Service animals, behavior management intervention, school guidance and counseling program, health education exemption from instruction, community resources, the revised harassment, sexual harassment policy, grades, and data and records retention. I mean, you can vote them en masse, you can deal with them separately, whatever the board's preference is.
Okay. So, did everybody get a chance to go back and take a look at those? Because they weren't included in the packet. We're trying to save paper, right?
Yeah, they're always in for first reading, but we don't print them again second reading. Is that a problem for folks, or is that?
Well, historically, we used to do
Correct,
that. But
yeah.
So would the board like a second copy at the second reading? I mean, we're happy to do
Available
that.
at the meeting would be appropriate, so that,
So
you know,
read
you
it.
you don't have to necessarily put them in the packet, but if you had 4 or 5 of them in case there was questions
Okay.
and somebody didn't bring them.
Is that okay with everyone?
And you have the first batch anyway.
We can't request that we bring the first copy back.
No, we could.
I'd like to, but I don't have any leverage on you.
Okay.
No, but if you have
Hey, I mean, I have a copy, I could bring it, like.
Just a reminder.
Yeah,
You
but
have 4 or 5
Let's
copies.
do it.
copies.
Okay.
I agree.
Yep.
Okay. So does anyone have any,
Could I move that we approve them as a package?
anyone have an issue, or you want to do
Yeah,
separate?
I do want to hold
Okay.
grades. It was one that I had, and I'm not sure.
Okay. So we'll hold that out and do that separately.
First 6?
Okay. So the motion is to do a second for numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion on any of those policies? If I remember, many of these are required by law.
Yes.
Absolutely.
State law.
So we'll do a roll call vote.
Yes. Carol Chelman,
Yes.
Kent LePage,
Yes.
Ann Walker,
Yes?
Mitch Schulman,
Yes.
Tom Martin,
Yes.
Leslie Stevens,
Yes.
Clay Haywood.
Yes.
Okay. And then a motion to consider the next, the grades.
Move to accept grades?
So moved.
Okay. Yes, Kent.
I guess I asked this towards Ed or Steve Z. Regarding, what is the state requirement as a policy on that? I want a clarification on that, okay? And the reason being is just some discussion, grades, period. I know I'm not talking about ranking and so forth up at the high school. This is beyond that, or this is an encompassing of the whole system. So if you could give me a clarification of the state's requirement under grades policy.
There is none.
Okay, that's what-
And we modeled this policy on the state of Maine's policy. This is language about absent mistake, incompetence, or fraud. That's language taken directly from the Maine state statute on grades, that a teacher's grades are final.
And what did we have in the past? Because I kind of went back to sort of cover that.
You didn't have a policy on this.
What did we, I mean, historically, I mean, again, there has to be something there that if mistakes and so forth, what was the issue for parent, or what was the process for a parent and or a
So
student?
here's I think what the difficulty is on the ground in schools, is that let's use a hypothetical. At a grade level, let's say 9th grade at the high school, a child gets his or her report card and there's a problem with a grade. And then they want to go and they want to have a conversation with the teacher. And so that's what, under our complaint policy, that's what we say will happen. We'll resolve it closest to the source wherein it occurs. So you go and see the teacher and you have a conversation. Perhaps the principal helps facilitate that conversation. And the teacher says, no, I'm not going to change my grade. I mean, I think the grade that was administered is appropriate. I'm a professional, and here's my rationale for it, and it's fully articulated. Now the question is, okay, principal or school board or superintendent, what are you going to do? Because I'm not happy with that decision rendered by that teacher. And so the question is, are you going to open up other avenues of appeal? Certainly in the case of a mistake, you could allege that. If the teacher, for whatever reasons, is incompetent at the time they issued grades, or there's some fraud going on, absent that, you hire teachers to be professionals and explain their grading policy, go through the process, and render a grade. That's all this policy does, is basically say you got to have to solve it at the teacher level.
There's no arbitration.
There's no right of appeal. If the teacher won't agree to change it, then what kind of culture and climate does one create when you say then, okay, well, the principal can simply override Miss Burlett's grade? Mrs. Burlett is, I think. I mean, I don't want to open up a whole can of worms, but that's the issue this policy is trying to address.
Okay, so the concerns I have, because that clarifies some of the discussion I've had with myself on this. Okay. Is that one that you didn't mention is a grade is given, and it is found out. The only time I can think of this ever came up and it did come up in the high school level, and then I have another area I want to make sure that I'm clear on, was plagiarism. It was found out afterwards that the grade had been given, class ranking was given to students, and plagiarism fell into discussion on this weeks or maybe a month later. I don't know the time period later. Does that grade stand?
No.
How is that?
Because plagiarism, you could argue a couple of things. One, certainly we have policy and handbook on plagiarism in handbooks. Right. And secondly, you've got a grade that was attained fraudulently. You plagiarized.
Okay. So the grade then would be down or changed.
Yeah, I think the penalty for plagiarism still in the high school is rather harsh, right? You take a 0 for the work.
For that period of work, maybe not the overall grade. I mean, again, that's the teachers. Teachers needs to work with that, because it was one issue. So the other clarification I need, and I maybe still even a little on the plagiarism, is all 3 elementary schools, K through 5, have the same type of ranking when they grade. Is that correct?
No.
They don't grade the same way. They grade by numbers and.
No. K through 5, Dondero, New Franklin, and Little Harbor all grade the same. I'm sorry if I didn't say it. They all grade the same. I want to make sure it's been a while since I had somebody in elementary school.
Yes.
But they all grade the same.
Changed since
okay, that clarifies me. Thank you very much.
I would just add that plagiarism at the university
is
expellable. Absolutely.
Yeah. Right. I had some reservations about this policy on the committee, but I decided to go with it because I'm going with what Ed is saying. I trust his judgment in terms of this is how you run the school system. You don't want a teacher being second-guessed by a principal, and that this is, right. I just defer to that. But I also have a tendency to look at situations as, well, what if the worst-case scenario? What if you did have a teacher who really did do a bad job and really didn't give the right grade? I guess that's what we have to live with and accept if we do the system, that's that, and I'm okay with that. But I think that is the only downside I can see of this, is that there could be a teacher that really just does give a grade that is not right. But what I would assume is that if that teacher did that, then those parents would bring this up to the principal and maybe the superintendent, and in an evaluation, the teacher would be reviewed, and and if this was coming up frequently with other students, it would be brought to the attention of the administration and something. So I think ultimately it would be dealt with. But, I think it is a possibility that you could have a situation like that, and people aren't going to be happy. But I think it's, like I said, I'm definitely going along with it because I defer to how you look at the situation.
Can I just comment on that? My personal experience with my kids who are in high school right now is that if there's a concern about a grade and the student goes to the teacher and says, I got a D on this and I really thought I did better, very often the teacher will work with that student and say, okay, let's look at what you did. It's very rare that a teacher says, stays, you're out of luck. So I think in general, if there's a concern that a student brings to a teacher, that 9 times out of 10, they're willing to work with that student and help figure out what happened, how can we fix it, how can we help you with this. So I'm not sure that's the situation we're looking to deal with here. I think it's a
No,
little
I'm
bit
just
different.
saying, you have to look at policies not only in the best case scenario, but also in the worst case scenario, and consider both options and make sure the policy. But like I said, I mean, I think it's fine.
Great.
Yeah, the teacher needs to be.
So let's have a roll call vote on.
Just one
I'm sorry,
further
Ken.
question on that.
Yeah, sure.
How many grade I mean, because what I'm kind of picking up on this is administration-wise, have we had a fair amount of grades changed by administrators?
No, but
Just under 1,000.
questions about it.
Right, we've had requests.
But the administrators usually stand behind the team and say, this is,
Yeah, they'll facilitate a meeting, I think, so that, we can all see the same, we're all looking at the same data that determine the grade. I mean, we want to be transparent, I mean, really, in terms of why a child received the grade he or she received, earned.
And my last comment on this is that because this is a policy that affects our relationship with a standing union, the teachers union, and maybe the administration, has the teachers union weighed in on this and have any issue with it?
Are you asking me?
Oh, yeah, sure. You're one of the few here.
I brought this up at APT, let's see, at a meeting for APT. And people were thrilled because it makes their grades stand, because as Leslie had said, most of the problems that have come to APT have been because parents have come in for whatever reason, have been disgruntled. And if your child goes to a teacher, 9 times out of 10, the teacher's going to work with the child to figure out what's going on. But sometimes parents perceive that their kids ought to be getting one thing when they haven't really done that. And it's kind of tough to swallow. And there have been instances when people have been asked to change grades.
Been asked by administration? Okay, I just want to make that clear.
Not necessarily asked, perhaps told.
So the administrator may not have done the change, but they
did the change.
They did the change
People
by
have had their
asking the
grades changed.
teacher or
That's
working.
the bottom line.
Okay, thank you.
So this will prevent that from happening.
Okay, that clarifies the big question.
And it takes care of all the other ways that, I mean, if somebody has inappropriately done something, it's going to rectify it on the student's behalf as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, roll call vote on.
No, I'm ready.
Oh, you're ready to
Approval of
vote?
policy
Ready to
grades,
vote.
IKAD. Carol Chelman,
Yes.
Kent LePage,
Yes.
Ann Walker,
Yes.
Mitch Schulman,
Yes.
Tom Martin,
Yes.
Leslie Stevens,
Yes.
Clay Haywood.
Yes. Great, thank you. New business, there's none listed, you have something?
Under new business, though, I would like, because we used to have a place here for future agendas, and I'd like to
Sure.
see that back on, because one I'd like, and I've had discussion with both family members and those in the community, is recognition. So often, we're not looking for rooms to be recognized by somebody, but, the last 2 years, we've lost former board members here, students, unfortunately, or past students, I think of Linda Betcher and her daughter passing this year, is that I'd like to see us, as a board, look at, we're going to have a new library down at the new middle school. We have a beautiful library at the high school. And I've seen this done very professionally and very sympathetic towards people. Is just a simple plaque at windows, people at the libraries saying, windows of reflection of the passing of somebody. Again, this way we don't have to go through committees. This is something that, at the rec board we discussed with the new field, how you're going to name certain things and so forth. So I'd like some discussion on that in the very near future of how we can do that when a board member or community member says, hey, look, and we can say, look, well, we'd love to, they had an outstanding relationship at Little Harbor or at the middle school, and we'll put a plaque at the at one of the windows in the library for remembrance of somebody who did something with the schools or something. Again, it's a nice thing to do to make people feel good, but there's a number of people in the last couple of years that had an impact on the school system, and nobody's going to know about it in 100 years, but it'd be nice to know the name of somebody that had influence.
Okay.
And lastly, I know, and I haven't got back to Steve Bartlett, in regards to these things, the Anania sign, which was supposed to be saved, is missing off the old softball backstop area. And I really would like some type of discussion given back to Kathy Ananier and something, because it was, I went back through the minutes, and it was definitely to be saved, and I'm a little discouraged that this was not more properly handled during the taking down. I don't know if it's hanging around somewhere. I've checked. Steve's done a little, I guess, checking on it and discussion. I mean, I know I'm not the only one asking for it, but it was a signboard that was supposed to be saved for going over to the new alumni field, or some type of commitment that way. Thank you.
Okay. So committee updates, anything on the JBC?
Well, we had the public meeting for the community members, and that went very well. There was some parents and abutters who asked questions, and we reviewed the project, where it's at, phasing and all of that. And jump in, anybody else who...
Well, we were meeting Thursday night. We haven't met since.
Yeah, and we haven't met since then. We have a meeting this Thursday night where we're going to be talking about GMP3, right?
Yes.
Deciding on that, hopefully. And that's really most recent stuff, right?
Yeah.
Anything I'm missing?
I don't think so.
It's actually, I don't know if people have driven by, but it's pretty exciting. Like, you can really start to see what the school's going to look like.
Yeah, site looks busy.
Yeah, it's great.
A lot of
It's
steel
really
hanging in
exciting.
there.
And the parking lot looks great.
Yeah, the parking lot looks great.
Didn't flood.
Stairs in the library.
It didn't.
That's awesome.
So, okay. So if nothing else, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you.